what you gonna do tonight? I've got my mama's car keys and you've got a ticket to ride. I'm licensed to ill with a drive to thrill. Rockabilly roots and a quarter Jack Daniels.
Hello, and welcome to Your Favorite Flick, a podcast where each week we celebrate a movie that my guest loves. We aren't here to be critics, we're here to be fans. Today I'm joined by my friend Barrett Landen, our second Louisiana expat in a row, and one of the kindest, most thoughtful people I know. It should probably be noted that most of my friends are assholes, so we're grading on a curve here. We're talking about Uncle Buck, classic starring one of our shared favorites, comedy icon John Candy. We get into some meaningful dialogue in this one on the nature of adulthood, responsibility, and families, both of birth and of our choosing. Don't worry, though, we also spend a good part of the episode talking about what makes this movie, and Candy in general, so goddamn funny. Hope you'll enjoy it. Barrett Landen, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell the audience what movie we're here to talk about today?
Brad, I am so freaking excited. So when I first heard your first episode with Chris, I'm like, I'm on it. So I texted you immediately. So I'm so thrilled to be here. So we're going to talk about one of my absolute favorite movies and one of my favorite comedians, actors, just general human beings, John Candy and Uncle Buck.
When I first texted with you about this, you said John Candy even before you said Uncle Buck. Like, you knew that it was a John Candy movie you wanted to do. Why that strong affinity with him?
First up, I think it's because he is a pillar of Canadian comedy. First.
Okay.
So I think second, he almost defines such a critical part of my childhood. And I think a lot of people that grew up like early millennials, late Gen X, there's something about Candy, something about his movies, especially his partnership with John Hughes in so many movies. There's something about that impacted having your childhood. And as a person, he's so approachable, he's vulnerable. He brings himself to his roles in such a way that is safe as a kid. So I remember you could watch these PG movies, which I think PG movies back in the day could be R, depending on how you
But
define it.
now, yes.
But I remember the language in Uncle Buck. I know you have Macaulay Culkin come up to his sisters like, waiting for your sex. I'm like, oh my God. At like 6 years old, I would never be able to say that. But there's something about every time I see that man on screen and I felt safe. And like part of one of the core memories that I'd go to your Nan's house in Baton Rouge, and infamous Uncle Paul would be there, her uncle. And I've probably seen Uncle Buck 12, 13 times with him. And so I remember 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. If he happened to be in Baton Rouge, we would watch that together. And it was like our special little moment. And we lost our grandparents so early that I'd never really had that relationship. And I think I always saw that as like, this like kind of a grandfather relationship. And it's like he and I would laugh at the same things. We could watch it 20 times, but it hits every time. And I think it's just such an iconic movie. And the imprint it had on my life was so special that I couldn't do anything else. Like that was the first thing that popped in mind.
I love that. And just for the audience, Barrett and I grew up together. Our parents were friends, so we knew each other from when Barrett was born. And we share a lot of friends that are really family. So Uncle Paul, who he mentioned, is not blood with either of us, but was very much family to both of us. And just a great raconteur and source of humor, and just like rough and gruff, but so great with kids, where there are some Uncle Buck similarities there for sure.
Oh my God, rough under the edges, but he's brutally honest. He's open book, and he's absolutely a genuine, kind-hearted man at the core. And I totally agree with you. There are so many parallels between those two men. We could have a whole episode on Uncle Paul, in all honesty. I mean, he told me so many stories about when he was in World War II stationed in the Pacific. And I was like, well, tell me about that. And he's like, well, I'd hang out with these guys from Alabama and Florida and Georgia, and these guys from Chicago and Philly. And he's like, I just had nothing in common with these guys from the South. Like I talk like the guys from Chicago. I talk from the guys like Boston, and we listen to the same music. Dean Martin, my boy Dean. And we talk about New Orleans characters. I think we can almost have a whole episode on that.
No, I really appreciate that. Okay.
If you watch this documentary, I Like Me,
Yeah.
John Candy's documentary. But the love that a lot of his peers had for him was so telling about what type of man he was and what he brought to his characters. And then also how he brought you into the movie and experience by being that open and being that kind-hearted and being that warm.
There's a story, I don't remember if they talk about this in the documentary, but it's one I've always loved that, during the NFC Championship game, Joe Montana, right before the famous catch, Joe Montana's leading the Niners down the field, and he looks up at the crowd and he goes to the huddle, "Oh, look, John Candy." And that's a funny story to me about Montana that, like, of course, he was so cool under pressure that he could do that. But it also to me says something about John Candy, like that he was a guy whose face you would pick out of a crowd and just be happy to see him at one of the most tense situations in your life.
Oh my god, yes. I mean, I can totally relate to that. And then also, like, how he'd be gracious and being recognized in that kind of random way.
Yeah, maybe even if he knew about it, be slightly embarrassed, that
Yeah.
he would not want to be the center of attention there.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned him as a Canadian comic, and there's such a great lineage coming out of SCTV as he did, but ever since then of Canadians in comedy. You are Canadian by extraction, even though you didn't grow up there. So I'm interested in how that impacts your relationship with him and just kind of thoughts on that as a whole.
So my mom grew up in Cape Breton Island, and if anyone knows kind of the Maritimes, the rough part of rough part of the world. You gotta be hardy, but they're very kind people. They're very funny. But I've always had an affinity and just a soft heart for Canadian relatives and people in Canada in general. But it's interesting how a period of time they funneled such amazing talent. You think of Eugene Levy, you think of Catherine O'Hara, which God rest her soul, just lost her.
For the audience, we're recording the week that Catherine O'Hara passed away. Yeah, what a
Yeah.
sad thing.
Yeah, it's terrible. And then I honestly think she was way too young. I mean, look at Schitt's Creek, right? They talk about how it's such a revival. It doesn't matter what age you're at as an actress or an actor, and you have that God-given talent. You have that. There's a sparkle, right? And certain people have it, certain people don't. And I think John Candy had it. I think Catherine O'Hara has it. I think Eugene Levy has it. Rick Moranis, and so many movies we were growing up with, he was in. So all these very special people funneling out of that country. It's such a special place. I think as a kid, I didn't know he was Canadian, but I was like, there's some sort of tribal connection. That certainly played a factor as I got older and realized that and got more in touch with Canadian roots and kind of understand mine. Mom's growing up and 6, 7 kids, 2 rooms, moving from Nova Scotia to New Orleans in the 60s with 1 air conditioning unit in the house. So anyway, the immigrant story, right? I think I've always had a love of that, and I think that's certainly contributed to the connection.
So we've kind of touched on this already, but I always like to ask my guests, so what got you into movies? Like, what were the big influences on you becoming a movie fan growing up?
5:30 in the morning, you're up. You're ready to roll on a Saturday. Your parents are not. So what you do is you go downstairs, fix a bowl of Frosted Flakes, and then put on the TV. And so first up, DuckTales or Tailspin or whatever else was on, but there's always some sort of 80s movie. And there's Ferris Bueller's Days Off or 16 Candles or Breakfast Club. I started loving movies at that time, probably when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. Uncle Buck was in the mix, but it's not the escape. I think it's the storytelling. It's the connection with characters. It's music is so important too, right? And so I don't know. I think it was a special hour and a half, 2 hours that you can have a connection and see some artistry. There's something there beyond just watching something on TV that I loved.
It's interesting to me that you say not as much the escape, which it is more for some people. Like you just named a bunch of John Hughes movies as early loves. And so it hits me with not mentioning escape in particular that you were seeing movies that were of your own world and maybe it was a perspective on your own world was part of what was interesting as opposed to escaping to another.
No, that is such a great point. And I think one thing I was also bring up is like for the longest time, there's always been a soft spot for me with Chicago and the suburbs of Chicago. And, I don't know if it's like watching WGN as a kid in New Orleans and Bozo the Clown. And yeah, I remember seeing news reports. It's like, oh, it's 21 degrees outside. And I was like 4.5 or 5. It's like, it's 70 in New Orleans. It's like weird. I was like,
Right.
or to the many, many Cubs bars in New Orleans. Like there's something, some connection. Then all his movies were set in the suburbs of Chicago. And so it just like you're totally right. See such parallels in life. The high school in Lafayette I went to looks exactly like the one in Breakfast Club because I think it's literally the same architect.
Right,
So
right.
they're in like the library, and I'm like, oh my god, it's like seeing your familiarity on screen, but seeing artistry around it, seeing something different, seeing something deep and hilarious, and I don't know, there's that connection, the familiar.
And it strikes me, for both of us, but for you even more than me being a few years younger, that we were always a little younger than the teenagers in these John Hughes movies. I think maybe, and I haven't thought about it in these terms before, there was a little bit of aspirational aspect to it of like, oh, that could be me in 5, 10 years for the good and the bad.
We've reflected on like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Okay, so when I turn when I turn 15, I'm totally gonna trick my parents. Oh, I'm gonna skip school. I'm going to steal my friend's dad's amazing Ferrari. But we're gonna have this incredible day in Chicago because apparently that's only an hour away from New Orleans. Um, as a kid, I was like, "Wow, that's incredible. High school seems amazing." You know. uh,
But one of the things great about Hughes is by the time you get to high school, yes, your life is not literally that, but emotionally, it's not dissimilar from John Hughes movies in certain ways, at least in my experience.
no, not at all. I mean, you're gonna be that outsider. You're gonna be. Oh gosh, I just finished watching Oklahoma. Is it Tia? Tia.
Tia, yeah.
She's 15, getting moved from Indianapolis to Chicago, a new school, angry at her parents, but also feeling like sort of an insider, wanting to fit in, but not really feeling like you fit in. And I think that's a story of 90% of us.
It's funny, movies often make it simple, and I think John Hughes movies recognize the complexity. It's not as simple as cool kids and outsiders. There's a lot more kind of sliding back and forth, and there's a lot of quote unquote cool kids who feel like outsiders or feel insecure. I think there's a truth to the teenage experience that he held on to as an adult that I think's hard, that I think slips away for a lot of us, at least at times.
Oh, 100%. Also, when we think about 1980s middle class, yuppie kind of suburban life, and like how it's supposed to be picture perfect, but in each one of his movies, it is not. Like you think about Breakfast Club, like Uncle Boy, family doesn't communicate. There's challenges between the parents work too much. You got a rebellious teenager. You got younger kids that doesn't seem like their parents take care of them much. Go away for 2.5 weeks with an uncle that they don't really trust. So you see this image of, oh, they live in this beautiful white picket fence, beautiful neighborhood. Like you think life's perfect, and it is not. And it takes someone as raw and honest and vulnerable and crass like an Uncle Buck, come in and fix, and then in turn he gets fixed. Like he also comes to the middle. He rounds off his edges that he needs to have rounded. But there's often that storyline and arc, right, in a lot of John Hughes
Right.
movies.
I'm
Planes and Trains
laughing.
and Automobiles. Oh my god, it's
Well,
not that. I mean, that's a whole nother episode, but yeah.
we could talk about that. We get some recommendations. That one might actually be my favorite Candy movie, especially now as an adult. When you talk about sort of the sameness of suburbia, I love how there would be little references to that, like when Buck's knocking on the wrong door and he finally realizes it and he says, "Do you know how many big white houses there are in this street?" Like,
Totally. But then also like yelling it, and
right.
it's just like whereas if you're in Wrigleyville, where he's at, that's perfectly fine. They're used to random people screaming at 2 a.m.
And that brings to an interesting aspect of this movie. A lot of Hughes's movies, not all of them, but a lot of them are set in this upper middle class world, and they don't really get out of that upper middle class world. Whereas this one, I mean, maybe it doesn't in a sense of location, kind of, but Buck comes in as this thing from outside of that world. And I'm interested in your take of how does that conflict, but also compatibility of worlds work in this movie, and how does it inform what's going on?
Man, that's a great question because you think juxtaposition between two very different lives. And honestly, I think it's probably the mirror to a lot of big cities in America at the time. You had flight to the suburbs. You had cities were a little rough. I mean, think of New York City in the 70s.
Yeah.
It's probably coming out of that, and people rush into New Jersey and all the suburbs. So I think You're right. I think it's such a mirror to a lot of big cities in life, two different lifestyles. Someone struggling is a little bit of a hustler. Honestly, we probably know a lot of people like this in New Orleans growing up,
Yep.
but there's still some kindness, there's some really good heart to it. But there's challenging life that leads to behavior that's probably not considered ideal behavior. And then on the other hand, you have the pressure of living in, suburbia or living in that upper middle class lifestyle, the thing that they think they need to pursue, making your kids angry, working yourself to death, and not spending time with your kids. Like, so does it become worth it? Then you start
Yeah.
having all these problems, and it's like, who is actually really happy?
I think it's great that very much what you're saying, this movie doesn't seem to be making a judgment between those two things. It's maybe, in as much as there's a moral, it's maybe looking more at a middle path than it is at saying one of these things is the right way to live and one of them is the wrong way to live.
For sure. And I think it's like you see the pros and cons of both origin stories, right? I think there's no judgment in what he's presenting or how he writes or his story arc or how he developed his characters. And I think that's also what is safe watching these as a kid. When you're growing up, it becomes an environment where I don't feel judged because these characters don't really feel judged, either inherently by the writing, but by the characters themselves. And so that became a safe space. Like when you talk about how it felt being in school in the 90s and 80s, and gosh, maybe in fifth grade, fourth grade, and they had an eighth grader that would come and punch every one of us in the stomach. And he's twice as big as them. What are we supposed to do? That's type of stuff happened. You just suck it up. That's just what you did, right? It creates a safe space for 2 hours. So maybe in that way, there's a little bit of escape because it's like a mirror in your own life and kind of what you're used to, but also in a way that you can be vulnerable. Like you don't have to worry about being yourself, and it's just a safe space to watch.
And I think if that scene were in a John Hughes movie, he wouldn't forgive the kid and say that's fine, but I think we'd probably get some insight into, oh, this is probably a pretty miserable kid if he's having to punch kids 3 years, younger than him. And I think in these sorts of things inform me now as an adult in thinking about that. Well, if somebody really has that need to be cruel or mean, I kind of feel for them. What's going on with them? Not in all cases, but in many, I can get there.
There are exceptions to that rule. Um,
Right.
and I think that's maybe also a time and place too. I think that we grew up with Sesame Street. We grew up with a lot of these programs, and having empathy was not considered outside the norm. And we look at Tia. The initial reaction would be, "I'm going to meet that girl with aggression. She's acting horribly, disrespectful. Okay, well, I'm going to put her in her place as a parent." And Buck doesn't take that approach, right? Even when she does something horrible and throws him on the bus, lies to his girlfriend, and then his girlfriend breaks up with him. You could see the approach he takes of, okay, she's really not doing great. I'm going to pause, not respond to this, and then figure out an approach to resolve. And that's what he did, right? It's different than what we would normally react to, right? When a kid's acting that way.
Granted, she's 15, so some paternalism is appropriate, especially when he's watching her. But I think in a lesser movie or in the hands of lesser creators than Hughes and Candy, his whole trying to stop her interactions with the boy could come up as overly paternalistic in a negative way. But I think because of what you're saying, we buy into the fact that even if he oversteps at times, he really has this girl's best interest at heart. He's not being a disciplinarian just to be a disciplinarian, but rather he is forming an emotional connection with her. Feels an immediate one because of being family, and he knows her a little bit. Seems he hasn't seen her much before. But I'm wondering how you feel about that relationship, of maybe that risk of going too far, and how they modulate that.
For the longest time, Tia would feel that he's trying to win over my parents. So he's going to get involved in this and try to disrupt my relationship with this guy. He doesn't care about me. He cares about showing a good impression to my parents. And so she comes in thinking these are his intentions. I think by today's standards, there'd be a little overstepping, coming from a perspective that she can't take ownership of the situation. She can't leave herself out of this. She needs a man to help her out of this. But I think you see her start to change perspective on that.
I think it's so telling that in the over the top scene of the by then ex boyfriend being in the trunk, that they very much become partners, she and Uncle Buck. It's not just, oh, he saved her. I think it's great that we realize she got herself out of the bad situation at the party. Like by the time he gets there, we think he's going to find her. And in fact, he finds this asshole in bed with some other girl. And to his credit, saves the other girl. That's off screen, but heavily implied. But I love that by the time they're kind of lightly torturing the ex boyfriend, they are very much in it as a team. It's not just him as the actor and her as the rescued.
That scene in the car when he's in the trunk, when he said, are you going to tell my parents? And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Because I think it's like that at that point she realized, oh, we're understanding his true intentions, but also it may be a turning point for him where it's like, look, it's the right thing to do, or it's the right thing to do is to help her through this. I don't care if her parents know. Oh, I don't care if they are glad that I did this and then would love me in a better way or accept me more. So it's almost like the turning point in that car, in that scene. And, of course, pop in the trunk and he's got good aim with a golf club. I got to say that.
Also, in that scene in the car, there's so much emotion in this movie, but kind of the emotional heart in a way. He needs help getting his girlfriend back, and that's mostly, not only, but maybe mostly is even strong. That is in part because Tia lied to his girlfriend, but he doesn't frame it that way when he tells her he needs help. He says, I've been with this girl for 8 years, and I've messed things up, and I need your help. So it's not a conversation of you lied and you have to make up for that. It's an emotional conversation of this is something I need in my life and you're in the position to help me. And I would really appreciate your doing that for me. I just think now, would you later find out that he scripts the conversation for her and what to say to the girlfriend? So he's
I
still a
mean, you're not
little,
gonna get you're not gonna get rid of the inner city Chicago hustler side. He's still
right,
gonna have a little
right.
bit of like, yeah, oh yeah,
There's actually a line early in the movie that I clocked this time, and I don't usually write down a lot of quotes, but this one really hit me. When the younger daughter, played by Gabby Hoffman, when she asks about why we need boys, Tia answers her, "We need boys so that they can grow up, get married, and turn into shadows." And that feels to me, and interested in your thoughts on this, that feels to me a lot of what Uncle Buck offers in her life is maybe a counter to that line.
yeah. That's such a deep line, right? And I think as a kid, didn't fully appreciate the meaning behind it. But you're right, and you think about all the other male figures or men figures in her life. She has her dad. He's missing for most of the time, or obviously when they're having dinner before they leave for back to Indianapolis. Obviously, you can tell there's tension, there's problems, but the dad's just ignoring it.
Right, the
You
mom's at
know?
least trying, like, the mom
Yeah,
doesn't connect well, but she's trying. The dad does seem like he's a shadow, you know?
yeah. Oh, completely. Any other friend that she may have at school, and then observing what's going on with that boyfriend of hers. This like there's the showing up as how a man should show up, or a
Yeah,
partner, or just a decent person,
yeah.
and none of them do.
Yeah,
It's
and
the
I was
person
thinking
you
of
least suspect that would, right? And that's Buck.
yeah, yeah. So this is a movie that is certainly about manhood in some ways, but I think it's wonderful that a lot of that perspective on manhood is coming through the kids and a young woman. So it's not this he-man or must be the provider type of manhood. It's like, what does it look like for a man to show up and be a person in your life? And about being human, like you said, more than just being a man.
And it's like, in the end of the day, what makes a good person? What makes a good parent? Just show up. Like that's such a big thing. And
Yep.
it's so hard for a lot of people. But what I love about the kids is how insightful kids are and how aware kids are, doesn't matter the age. And you think about Macaulay Culkin as, I think, his first major movie, right? Was
I
Uncle
believe
Buck?
so.
And, you know, seeing Tia sit by the window, he knew exactly what she was waiting for. They're getting in the car to go to the track. He's like, "Oh, the pretty horses. Yeah, we can make some serious coin too." And it's like they know exactly what's going on. He grills them on the kitchen table, which is one of my favorite scenes. And Macaulay talks about that scene in the documentary. But he talked about we had so many problems with my dad. My dad was overbearing, and he talked about how traumatizing that was as a kid. Being on set, it's aggressive, like he's young, and he's like, John was the one that was always kind of looking out for him, helping coach him. "You all right, kid?" Like, kind of checking in on him. I love that scene. He's like, we practiced that scene so much and it's so hilarious. You get some of that ad lib response time with John and you get back and forth, you volley back and forth. And imagine doing that with John as your first acting career. Like that's just,
Yeah.
anyway, I love that scene. It's so great.
One of Candy's major talents on screen to me is that he was an all-time great reactor in terms of facial expressions, but also just with his dialogue that felt like he was taking in what the other actor told him and responding in a way that worked, that built a better scene, that wasn't just about, "Oh, I'm the comic center of this." And that's very much in that interrogation scene. He allows Culkin to be the really funny one in that scene, which is terrific.
It's just like a sign of a good actor, actress, comedian is being gracious and allowing your partner to have their moment, you know?
Yeah.
And I think John always did that.
There are great actors that probably are complete nightmares to work with, but there definitely is a school of acting, and I use the word school broadly, that is about that level of collaboration, and it's just to me wonderful when that comes across. So what are some of Candy's on-screen skills or the things that he does that really speak to you, really work for you in his performances?
I wonder if this is tied back to his days at SCTV or some of the improv stuff that he did early on. I think his delivery, his spontaneity, I think like when he reacts to certain lines or when he's with actors, I think about that scene with the kids in the car and he's toiling over the decision to go to the track or not, kind of the moral dilemma that he's facing.
Right.
And that reaction is so heart wrenching and so deep. And John Hughes let him go. And I think that inherent, instantaneous, hilarious nature is what I love. I think Seinfeld always said, you either have it or you don't. It's in your genes or it's not. It's in the sparkle you have or it's not. And I think he had it. Like he just is instantly funny, instantly an angle, and then he could just deliver gold. And I think that's what I love about him.
You mentioned the interrogation as a favorite scene. What are some real standout scenes to you in this one?
Oh my God. One that I know my dad and I used to always laugh about when he'd go in for the performance review with the vice principal. And he's like he was going to the bathroom and you got kids, with the little legs dangling. He's like, huh. Looks at the urinal, they're like this big. But he's like, where do I blow out my cigar smoke? He's just so out of his element, right? And he's sitting there with that cute little kid that I'm like, I kind of identify with that little kid, glasses on, like scared of the vice principal. And he walks in and he's buck melanoma, like like that scene with one of my favorites, and it's like so quotable, so hilarious. He timed it right. It's just, oh my God, hilarious.
It's so hard to pick favorites in this one. One of them that I really love is right before the interrogation when he's making the breakfast. It kind of leads right into that scene. And he's got everything in the kitchen out. I just like clocked watching it. For breakfast, he has 2 different mustards and a jar of pickles out. And he's making eggs and something like it's like, what kind of eggs is he making here?
He's cooking our garbage.
Yes, yes. Culkin says that immediately upon entering.
Oh my
But
God, I think honestly, he was gifted with some of the best lines in the whole movie.
and you can see why, right? He made him work. It feels to
Oh,
me like that might have been the thing if you write him more lines on set because he's killing it.
yeah.
Time. And Matt, something we said we wanted to visit a little bit more. What about those 2 kids? How do you feel like they got those kind of child actor performances? Besides, I think having 2 actors that prove to be truly excellent actors themselves.
They nailed it with casting. But I think there's a spark, there's something special with Macaulay. And I think there's a reason they chose him. And the way he delivered his lines, the way he was able to hold a scene with such an iconic person like Candy, the way he was able to do little jives. He was hilarious. And then his sister was so insightful, but so cute, so innocent, but also very aware of what's going on. But her delivery was so wonderful. And it's hard to work with child actors from what I've heard.
Notoriously. Yeah.
Yeah. I think John Hughes, maybe it's the environment he creates, maybe it's the way he directs, the way he writes. I don't know. But it seems that he can get that magic even when it's more difficult. Getting the right actors, like making sure they feel supported or the script's right. But every one of his movies hits, it plays, it works.
Hughes, Spielberg, and Chris Columbus are the 3 that I think of when it comes to working with child actors. And interestingly, Columbus was a protege of both of them, did projects with both of them. But that they just created some sort of openness of environment that allowing kids to be kids. They really seem to nail that in this movie. And like you said, across Hughes's movies. An important question specifically for you on this list, Barrett. You are very much a car guy. You were a car guy 12 years before you could drive, probably. Is Uncle Buck's car the greatest car in movie history?
Oh, 100%. I mean, the first thing is the icing on the cake is the abandoned auto sticker on the windshield.
Yes, yes.
So this is the other thing. What I love about these movies is the attention to detail and the timed backfires or the suspension that would take about 35 minutes to stop recoiling. But I always remember as a kid, it's like, God, that must be the most comfortable car in the world. It's like, we need that car in New Orleans. Have you seen these streets uptown? It's a hell of a car. I could totally see that in the driveway. It'd be fantastic.
One more thing I want to make sure we don't miss, and we've talked a lot about the comedy and kind of the heartfelt comedy. I think an interesting thing in this movie, compared to even some other John Hughes movies, is there are moments that are just outright absurdist, like things that could not happen in the real world. I love it in the scene where he's going into the bedroom that it actually becomes a horror movie for a minute.
Yes.
Like the
Yeah.
the shots and the music cues change.
It's got classic like Friday the 13th kind of vibes to it, the extra long drill bit. And it also is like, where did he get power drill from?
I like this kind of running theme that Uncle Buck is kind of a Boy Scout. Like he's always prepared. He has, just all
He's
this
got the
stuff.
hatchet. Oh, he's
Right.
not leaving the house without the hatchet. Oh, you need the 3 wood? Oh, it's back there too. You need some head bashing. It's there.
Right.
It's almost like the mobster toolkit. Like, what, you got to collect some money this afternoon. What are the tools you're going to use in the?
Another one for me, and it's just a small moment. I love this because of the Chicago connection you were talking about and being a Cubs fan, but that when he uses the clappers, the lights at Wrigley Field come on along with his apartment lights.
Freaking love it. Freaking love it. And he's got like, God love him. He's got this giant Cubs jersey on. I love that scene in his apartment too. And he's like, Bob who? He's like, your brother? Like,
Oh, Bobby.
what's going on, man? I forgot that it was in Wrigley Village, like right next to the stadium. I was like, oh my God, like how cool would that have been?
I know you couldn't dream of living there now, being a hustler like Uncle Buck. You'd have to be a much higher. There's probably a lot of hustlers in that neighborhood, but they're probably much higher rent hustlers than Uncle Buck was.
A little more sophisticated games,
What have we missed? Anything else that you were thinking about with the movie that we haven't hit on?
Someone posted Dan Aykroyd's eulogy, and they talked about the last scene in Uncle Buck where he like smiles and waves to Tia.
Yeah.
And he's waving to me, and I recognize all the joy he gave me in my childhood. I'm like, holy shit, that touched home. And I
wow.
think that ending scene where he's just got that genuine, warm, candy look, smile, it's so iconic. His face, his gesture, that is childhood, is that last scene. And I was like, dude, you're speaking my language. That articulates perfectly how I feel about that scene.
That touches me, and I already love that as a final shot, but that's going to inform my viewing and thinking about this going forward. I love the idea of that being kind of a goodbye to all of us.
And you think about losing so many people young that are so talented, but also like how many people love that guy. And he was 42.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 3 years older than he was.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine passing away at that age, but living such a full life up into that.
It feels so weird, like even to think he's younger than us in this movie, much less that he died younger than us. It just doesn't feel right.
No. There's times where there's special people that are alive. They touch a lot of people, even if you don't know them personally. And then they're here for a short time and they're gone. You got to savor those moments. You got to try to appreciate it when you can. And I think that's maybe a good lesson, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So hard to switch gears from that, and we'll see how I handle this in the edit. But I don't want to skip talking about other movies. So we've already hit on some good ones.
Let's do it.
What are some movies you'd recommend to folks who love Uncle Buck?
Oh my God. Okay, so Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is on my top 5. I absolutely love that movie. Matching him with Steve Martin is genius. I mean, you got those two geniuses, very different techniques and approaches, but the way they play off of each other, I love that. Love that movie. I love Great Outdoors. It's one of my
Okay.
favorite movies. It reminds me of those vacations with friends that are family, right? Like for the longest time, I thought we were related, and
Right.
it's like, oh, my cousin Bradley. Like it's just or my
We
cousin
are,
Jeff.
you know.
Yeah, we are. Like I mean, in all honesty, we see each other. We're closer than we are with our own families, in a way, right? Like I love your mom like a second mom.
I mean,
She's
a lot of my
amazing.
family's nuts, Barrett, so it's not necessarily, you're not necessarily beating tough competition, but,
So yeah, I mean, I think Great Outdoors reminds me of that. It reminds me of those family vacations. It reminds me of like, and plus Dan Aykroyd's in it. Come on, Dan Aykroyd and John Candy, amazingly good friends, but also incredibly talented Canadian actors and comedians. Stripes is pretty great. Um,
I recently recommended Stripes on an episode. I always recommend the first half of Stripes to people.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like Canadian Bacon has its moments. I love Home Alone, obviously, but I think Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and Uncle Buck, absolutely.
I had a few that are not John Candy movies, but that this reminded me of one very much a comedy, The Way Back with Sam Rockwell and Steve Carell and the great Tony Collette. I always love Tony Collette. It's about a kid at a summer resort who befriends this older kind of crazy guy played by Rockwell, but he imparts a lot of wisdom to him while maybe not being a role model you would pick for your child. On the dramatic end, I thought about You Can Count on Me with Mark Ruffalo. Extremely different tone for a movie, but it's about a long lost uncle coming back into a kid's life. Very much played for dramatic stakes, but there still is some literal plot similarity with that, but also some real thematic resonance of what it looks like when we have these people in our lives besides our parents, but who play a very important role in us developing who we are.
Mm,
Um, so
that's
that's two
wonderful.
that hit me.
No, no, and I think the other one we mentioned or talked about before is like Groundhog's Day, and I absolutely love that movie, and I think it's got the redemption story, it's got the drama, but it's also got I love Bill Murray even though he's an asshole. I know he's an asshole, but it's so hilarious, but so touching, and then I love Harold Ramis. He's also someone we lost too young. I mean,
Absolutely.
Caddyshack, freaking love Caddyshack. I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Groundhog Day I could watch over and over and over and over again, and I think it's
Ironically enough, right, that you could watch it over and over and
yeah,
over 'cause you're
yeah, so to speak. I also love that there's philosophy professors that will use it in their class, kind of talk about life and talk about redemption, talk about what's important and being good just because it's what you need to do, not because you're trying to do it for personal reasons. And I
yeah,
love that movie
and something to it about actually getting over the hump of doing it for personal reasons to eventually some kind of zen state of, I'm gonna do this because it's what I need to do," and that you can't guarantee this happens, but that eventually leading to some further redemption for him.
for sure, and like
Uh,
getting to the person he loves. You
yeah,
know,
and and
um,
and Buck doesn't start off as bad as that, but he is somebody living for himself in a lot of ways. It's somewhat inconsiderate. You know what I want to bring into to play? Just I can't believe we didn't mention her. Amy Madigan, who is back in the spotlight this year for the first time in a long time because she's nominated for an Academy Award. But to me, she is terrific in what could be a thankless role as the girlfriend. But any thoughts on her character and her performance?
the patience that woman has, she's almost like the personification of his morals, right? He's like, you should
Yeah,
be. It's like, hey, this partnership and this love is here. We just need you to move a little bit. Just commit a little bit. Be a little more responsible. Be a little less selfish. And he just kind of strung her along for 8 years. And she comes in and sees her dancing with,
Laurie Metcalf.
yes, Metcalf.
Yeah.
That's it. But she comes in that scene. You know, you got 8 years of this stringing along, and that's it. I think you're right. It's like a thankless role in a way.
One of the things I like, Amy Madigan's a beautiful woman, but I love that they don't doll her up. That she looks like an unusually beautiful person to be working at a tire store, but that she could be working at a tire store.
Totally.
And very much that she could be in Buck's world. Because sometimes in the 80s that the actresses were beautiful, actresses are often beautiful, but that they were glammed up in ways that didn't fit the setting overall. And I appreciate that she looks, blue collar.
No, for sure. Well, and it's like the interesting thing is you could see her in stepping in both worlds. But she become this straight-laced, honest, hardworking, self-made person living in Buck's world. dealing with these characters, dealing with these hustlers. You're not going to get any BS past her.
Yeah.
She walks in, she's like, "You don't even say anything. I know exactly what's going on." Walks out. She did a fantastic job.
We talked early about a lot of the theme of this movie being finding kind of a middle path, not saying this way's right or that way's right. And I hadn't thought about the degree to which she is that middle path for Buck. So she's already kind of found that balance between those worlds. She wants to be domestic, she wants kids, but at the same time, she's tough as nails.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe that's what you need to be with a guy like Buck for 8 years and then survive and thrive in that environment. Dealing with people trying to take advantage of you or trying to build a business by yourself from the ground up. Like, you got to be tough. You can't take any BS. She never judged him for the way he acted, the way he did things, like decisions he made. She basically said, "Look, I need XYZ from you. If you don't give
Yep.
me XYZ, it's over." Like, it's not a, "Hey, you're a bad person. Like, you're horrible. Why are you doing this?" So I agree. It's like she's almost just brutally honest, hard as nails, but unwavering.
There's something very modern about that. Any good advice you read on relationships or just asking for what you want in life are now about, hey, this is what I want or what I need. This is not about making a value judgment on you. And she just embodies that in 1989, which I think
Yeah.
is in some ways ahead of its time.
Oh, for sure. That's not something that was portrayed very often in that decade. Yeah.
One final question for you. Anything you've watched recently, whether it's new or something old you just caught up to that you'd recommend to the audience?
Recently been going through the entire library of Bond movies, starting with Dr.
Okay.
No. You go through some of the Sean Connery slapping some of the women, like, probably some
It's
stuff in
rough
the 60s.
sometimes.
It's rough
Yeah.
sometimes. But there's some kitschy, great aspects of those early movies. And so we're going through the sequence and we're watching a lot of stuff that we're not paying attention to just with a 7-week-old. So you're up at 2 in the morning. You can't quite pay attention. So it's like often stuff you've seen before. And she's like, "Put on one of the Pierce Brosnan ones just because they're ridiculous and like fun."
Barrett, thank you so much for being with us today, and I look forward to having you back soon. That's it for this one, folks. I'm Brad Glazer. I host, produce, and edit the show. Julia Mott is our social media manager. In fairness, I should say that she's put together a social media plan that yours truly has not done a good job of implementing yet. Julia is also our guest next week. We'll be talking about Quentin Tarantino's rollicking revisionist history masterpiece, Inglourious Basterds. The music you hear to start and close the show is by my friend Richard Bates and his band, The Huns. That's Hons, because I've been asked, from their great album, To Skyward. You can find The Huns' music on Bandcamp. Please follow, rate, review, subscribe, all the things. You can follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky at Your Favorite Flick, on Letterboxd at Favorite Flick, or shoot us an email at yourfavoriteflick@gmail.com. Huns, take us out.
If I spend my days working for a dream, even one with higher rate of success, made crazy stupid money for crazy stupid things. Is that any part of keeping your heart? If I spent those same days brushing up on poetics, that's 14 times 365 inflections of I dearly love you. It's not just preparation. It's not just guessing what you need. It's not just communication. It's not just almighty timing. It's always, at least, a unique and shifting combination of some of those 3 or 4. If wishing made it so, I'd be just as talented and just as well known. If wishing made it so, I'd be just as handsome and just as flat broke. If wishing had made it so, you wouldn't sleep at night. You would not sleep till you were by my side. If wishing made it so, you would not sleep. You would not sleep till you were by my side. I asked the stars to ask the moon to go and find you. Tell